Oblivion. Guts has suffered more than any man should. Every scar on his body, every nightmare in his mind tells a story of pain. But his greatest wounds aren't the ones carved into his flesh. They're the ones that never heal, the ones that live inside him. The Berserker armor was supposed to make him stronger, but in truth, it only made his suffering worse. This armor devours life. That was Flora's warning. And she was right. When Guts wears the armor, his body becomes a weapon, but his soul pays the price. It doesn't just block pain, it removes it completely. It forces him to fight even when his body is broken. His bones crack, his muscles tear, his blood spills, but the armor keeps him moving like a puppet on strings. Every battle pushes him closer to the edge. Then there's the beast of darkness, the voice inside him whispering, waiting for the moment he gives in. It's not just an inner demon. It's his rage, his grief, his need for vengeance, all given form. The beast wants him to stop caring, to stop feeling, to become a true monster. And every time the armor takes over, the beast's grip tightens. Guts fights for Casca. He fights to protect the few people he has left. But the tragedy is, the more he fights, the more he turns into the thing Casca fears most. The armor gives him strength, but it also takes away his humanity. His greatest trauma isn't just the past, it's the battle within himself. He doesn't just fight enemies, he fights against becoming one. So the question is, how long can he keep fighting before there's nothing left of him? Orphan Crux. Guts' story doesn't begin with hope, it begins with death. A lifeless woman swings from a noose, her cold body left to rot beneath a stormy sky. Beneath her, a newborn cries, his first moments in this world drenched in blood and rain. He wasn't welcomed into life. He was discarded into it. Found by mercenaries, he wasn't seen as a child, but as a burden. From the very start, his existence was treated as a mistake, an omen of suffering. Could trauma be inherited? Guts never got the chance to find out. His first lesson was survival, and survival had no room for love. As a child, the closest thing he had to a father was Gambino, a man who never saw him as a son. To him, Guts was a tool, a disposable weapon to be trained and sold. He never spoke a kind word, never offered comfort, only orders, beatings, and the ever-present reminder that Guts' life had no value. You were born from the dead. All you bring is death. Those words were a scar, cutting deeper than any blade. Guts didn't just live with pain, he became it. At the age of 9, he was forced to kill a man in battle, his small hands gripping a sword too heavy for him. His childhood was over before it ever began. No lullabies, no warm embrace, only steel, only blood. The world taught him that to live, he had to fight, and he never stopped. But his pain didn't end with Gambino. It followed him like a shadow, creeping into every moment of his life. The Eclipse was the ultimate proof. Betrayed by the only people he had ever called family, he watched as the band of the Hawk was torn apart. Apostles surrounded him, their grotesque laughter echoing as they ripped his comrades to shreds. And then Griffith, the man he once trusted, offered them all as a sacrifice. The brand of sacrifice burned into his skin, marking him forever as prey for demons. In that moment, his birth trauma was mirrored. Once again, he was left to die, surrounded by death. His existence reduced to nothing but suffering. But unlike the day he was born this time, he refused to be powerless. He fought even when the odds were impossible, even when his body was broken. Blood bond, a connection forged in pain, broken by betrayal. For Guts, survival meant severing every tie, no matter the cost. Guts never had a childhood. He had a battlefield. His earliest memories weren't of laughter or warmth, but of blood, mud, and steel. Gambino's voice still echoes in Guts' mind, a reminder that love was never part of the equation. He wasn't taught to dream or hope. He was taught to survive. Every scar, every battle won was proof of his worth. Proof that he could stay, at least until he was no longer useful. The bond between Guts and Gambino was never built on affection. It was built on violence. A transaction where Guts paid his way with blood. But the currency of survival was cruel. Gambino's lover, Shisu, was the closest thing Guts had to a mother. The only person who ever offered him kindness. When she died of plague, Gambino didn't grieve. He blamed Guts, as if the boy who had nothing had somehow taken even more. From that day forward, Gambino's resentment turned to outright hatred. The beatings grew worse, the insults cut deeper. And before moving forward, if you're a fan of manga, anime, or manhwa, then you're in the right place. We upload 2 exciting videos every week, packed with amazing content. So if you don't want to miss out, make sure to subscribe and be part of our awesome community. And then, one night, drunk and furious, Gambino came to finish what fate had started. He raised his blade, snarling, "You should have died with her." In that moment, something in Guts snapped. The blood bond shattered. Survival meant choosing between dying at the hands of the only father he'd ever known or fighting back. And so he did. He killed Gambino in self-defense, but no part of him felt victorious. The man who had tormented him was gone, but so was the last thread tying him to any sense of belonging. That night, Guts didn't just lose a guardian. He lost the illusion that trust could ever be safe. Love was a liability. And from that moment on, he would never let himself be owned again. Grimsteel. Gambino didn't raise Guts, he forged him. Not in fire, but in blood. From the moment he could grip a sword, Guts wasn't a child, but a weapon. He wasn't taught to read or write, but to kill. His playground wasn't fields of flowers, but battlefields strewn with corpses. Gambino didn't see a boy, but a tool, honed and sharpened in the brutal reality of mercenary life. Every swing of the sword, every parry, every scream chipped away at his innocence, replacing it with the cold, hard pragmatism of survival. He learned to anticipate the trajectory of a blade before he learned the alphabet. He understood the language of death before he understood love. He became a creature of instinct, reacting, fighting, surviving, stripped of the vulnerability and emotional development of a normal childhood. The world, as presented to him by Gambino, was a simple equation: kill or be killed. There was no room for empathy, for connection, for humanity. Just the grim reality of the blade. This early immersion in violence didn't just scar his body, it warped his soul. It forged him into a weapon, effective and ruthless, but at the cost of his own humanity. Even when he escaped Gambino's grasp, the forge's mark remained, a constant reminder of the brutal lessons learned, a chilling echo in every fight, forever shaping his relationship with violence and the world around him. Rageborn. Rage isn't just an emotion for Guts, it's alive. It lurks in the depths of his soul, waiting for a moment of weakness. It growls when he hesitates, snarls when he suffers, and roars when he fights. This is Rageborn, the beast of darkness. It isn't an enemy he can kill. It's a part of him, a reflection of everything he's lost and everything he's willing to destroy. The beast wasn't born on a battlefield. It was forged in betrayal. When Griffith sacrificed the Band of the Hawk, when Guts was forced to watch everyone he cared about die, something inside him broke. His pain had no release, his grief had no comfort. All that remained was rage. And rage, when left unchecked, doesn't just burn, it takes form. The first time he felt it, it whispered in his ear. Kill them all. Crush. Devour. Every swing of his sword became heavier. Every kill more ruthless. His eyes would turn empty in mid-fight, his movements more savage. This wasn't just anger, this was something darker. The beast told him that love was weakness, that pain was pointless, that the only thing that mattered was blood. Then came the Berserker armor, and for the first time, the beast had a body. When Guts donned it, his pain vanished, his hesitation disappeared. He became something unstoppable. But the more he used it, the less of himself remained. The man who once fought for his friends, for Casca, now struggled to remember their faces. Even she, the woman he loved most, became a stranger when the beast took over. It didn't care about her. It didn't care about anyone. It only wanted one thing: more. More enemies, more blood, more destruction. Chainheart. Casca's story isn't just one of survival, it's one of chains. Shackles that started as iron but became something deeper. Something invisible, a heart bound by fear, by duty, by the ghosts of a past she never chose. This is Chainheart, the weight of a childhood stolen, a future shattered, and a soul that refuses to break, even when breaking might be mercy. She wasn't born a warrior. She was a child sold for a bag of grain, a girl whose worth was measured in scars. The nobleman who took her didn't just want a servant. He wanted obedience, submission, fear, but Casca wasn't made to kneel. The night he tried to take more than her freedom, she fought. She ran, she survived, and in that moment she learned something. The world wouldn't save her, so she would have to save herself. But survival has a price. When Griffith extended his hand, offering her a sword instead of chains, it felt like salvation, but it wasn't. He didn't rescue her. He reforged her. Casca traded slavery for loyalty, a nobleman's control for Griffith's approval. Every battle she fought, every victory she won was a plea. See me. Value me. Don't discard me. She wasn't just a soldier. She was Griffith's blade, his shield, his most loyal warrior. And she didn't realize until it was too late. She was still bound, just by something she couldn't see. Now she sits in the ruins of everything she once was, cradling a doll like a lifeline, her eyes vacant as the echoes of monsters whisper in the dark. Because chain heart never breaks. It only changes. And Casca? She's still bound. Not by iron, not by Griffith, but by the wounds that never had time to heal. The question isn't if she'll escape. The question is, can she ever be free? Soulscar, the Eclipse wasn't a battle, it wasn't war, it was slaughter, a massacre written in blood, carved into the souls of those who lived through it. Griffith didn't just betray his comrades, he fed them to the abyss. And for Guts and Casca, the wounds left behind weren't just physical, they were something deeper, something that never fades. This is Soulscar, a mark that time can't erase, a pain that never stops burning. Griffith's sacrifice wasn't hesitation, it was purpose. To become Femto, he had to give up everything, but he didn't just offer his men, he offered Guts and Casca. Their trust, their devotion, their very humanity, all fuel for his godhood. And as the Band of the Hawk was torn apart, their screams were nothing more than echoes in his ascension. Casca never had that choice. She didn't die, but she didn't escape either. The woman who once stood as a warrior, as a leader, as Guts' equal, was reduced to silence, to emptiness. The Soulscar isn't just a metaphor. It's the place she disappeared to, the mind's desperate way of shielding itself from something too horrific to process. Her body lived on, but the Casca who stood on the battlefield, who fought for her comrades, who loved, who dreamed, was gone. The Eclipse never ended for them. The brand ensures that hell never stops hunting them. Guts wakes up every night, his rage clawing through his skin. Casca stares into nothing, trapped in the moment she lost herself. The Soulscar is their bond. Not love, not trust. Pain, a wound too deep to heal. A question neither of them can answer. Does it ever close? Or will it keep bleeding, feeding demons and nightmares until there's nothing left? Griffith got everything. A kingdom, a throne, wings that stretch across the sky. But Guts and Casca, they got the truth. That some wounds don't heal, some scars don't fade, some horrors are forever. Dream price. Every dream has a price. For Griffith, that price was his soul. Dream price. The cost of a boy who sold his body to buy a kingdom. But when power is built on shame, can it ever lead to peace? Or only to ruin? Griffith wasn't just poor, he was powerless. He stood outside the castle walls watching nobles play at war while he fought for scraps. But he learned fast. Status wasn't about skill or courage, it was about control. And in a world where men used power to take, he used ambition to survive. His body became currency, his pride a sacrifice, not once, not twice, again and again, until it stopped hurting, until he convinced himself it didn't matter. But ambition built on suffering doesn't heal wounds, it buries them. Every battle, every victory with the Band of the Hawk wasn't just for conquest, it was proof. Proof that he was more than what they made him. That he wasn't just another toy in a noble's bedchamber. But the past doesn't vanish just because you outrun it. And when Guts walked away, Griffith realized he had never escaped at all. But power taken through suffering doesn't erase pain. It becomes it. Falconia stands, a city of miracles, a kingdom untouched by war. Griffith walks its streets as a god, worshipped and adored. But the ghosts never left. The boy in the noble's chambers, the commander screaming in the dungeons, the dreamer watching Guts walk away. He buried them all. But every time he looks in the mirror, every time he hears his own name, he is reminded. He is not Griffith anymore. He is only the dream now. Nothing else remains. God hollow. Pain, loss, betrayal. In Berserk, trauma isn't just a single moment of suffering. It's a shadow that lingers, a wound that never truly heals. Every scar tells a story, not just of the pain endured, but of the pieces of oneself that were lost along the way. In this world, survival isn't about healing. It's about carrying the weight of everything that has been taken and moving forward despite it. The question is never, can you recover? But, what's left of you once the suffering is done? The Band of the Hawk wasn't just an army. It was Griffith's dream, his purpose, his family. It was a home built through blood and loyalty, a place where broken souls found something to fight for, and in one moment, he threw it all away. The friends who would have followed him to the ends of the earth became nothing more than sacrifices, their laughter twisted into screams, their loyalty turned into their doom. For Guts, this wasn't just loss, it was annihilation. His only place in the world, the only people he had ever trusted, were devoured before his eyes. And the one man he had believed in, the one who had given him purpose, was the very one who had condemned them all. Casca's suffering didn't end with the Eclipse, it began there. She survived what no one should have, but survival came at a cost worse than death. She didn't just lose her comrades, she didn't just lose her body. She lost her voice, her memories, herself. The woman who once commanded armies, who stood beside Griffith and fought as an equal, was reduced to nothing more than a shell, trapped in terror, unable to even recognize the man who loved her. And for Guts, watching her slip away was another wound, another failure, another reminder that in Berserk, survival isn't the same as being saved. Crownfall. Pain doesn't always come with a sword. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the cold grip of chains, in the slow erosion of everything that made a man human. This is where gods die, not in battle, but in the dark, where no one can see them fall. Griffith, once a man who seemed untouchable, was reduced to something less than human. This was Crownfall, the moment his golden ambition cracked, revealing the fragile, broken boy beneath. Because when a king loses his crown, what's left? Before the dungeon, Griffith was more than just a leader. He was a symbol, a messiah in steel. He rode at the front of the Band of the Hawk, his presence alone enough to inspire men to charge into the jaws of death. A figure so radiant, so untouchable, that even Guts, the man who had stood beside him for years, couldn't see the cracks beneath the surface. But symbols don't bleed. Symbols don't scream. Until they do. And Griffith screamed. A year of torture didn't just tear his body apart, it was designed to unmake him. His fingernails ripped out, his voice reduced to a rasp, his skin flayed from his bones. But that wasn't enough. They stripped him of his tongue so he couldn't speak, shattered his tendons so he couldn't move, crushed his dream until it was nothing but a cruel joke. He had soared higher than any man dared, and now he lay in the filth of the dungeon, a worm in the mud. And in that filth, Griffith learned the truth. His kingdom was a lie. His crown was a delusion, flame guilt. She believed pain was purification, that fire could burn away weakness, temptation, sin. But the more she burned, the more she realized no flame was hot enough to erase who she was. The scars on her skin were nothing compared to the ones left in her mind. In a home ruled by faith, guilt wasn't just a lesson. It was law. She learned early that to be pure, she had to suffer. Desire was dangerous. Curiosity was defiance. Even hope felt like a betrayal. Every thought that strayed, every feeling she couldn't explain, it was all proof that she was unworthy, and impurity had to be punished. So she did what she was taught. She repented with fire, pressing hot wax into her flesh, waiting for the pain to cleanse her. It became a ritual, a silent prayer in the only language she knew. But no matter how much she burned, the whispers of doubt never left her. If anything, they grew louder. She convinced herself it was righteousness, that if she couldn't silence the voice in her own mind, she could drown it out with the screams of others. She became the hand of judgment, leading the charge against the so-called wicked. She burned villages, she branded men as heretics, but faith built on fear doesn't save, it only destroys. Sin spiral. In a world like Berserk's, fear breaks people long before death does. Nina's story isn't just about suffering, it's about how fear turns into addiction, how addiction leads to betrayal, and how, in a place without mercy, survival can mean losing yourself completely. She wasn't always like this. She was just scared. War had stolen her home. The cult had stripped away her hope. And the guards? They had taken what little control she had left. But that wasn't what ruined her. The real fall began when she found comfort in a vial, a few drops to make the fear disappear, a little more to silence the screams in her head. Before she knew it, she wasn't using it to escape. The drug was using her. At first, she told herself it was just to get through the next day, the next night. But the more she relied on it, the more the cult saw her as something useful. She was weak, desperate, easy to manipulate. They didn't have to force her to betray others. They just had to offer her another taste. So she did what they wanted. She tricked others, led them into the same misery she was drowning in. She convinced herself it wasn't her fault. that she had no choice. But every person she betrayed, every life she ruined, chipped away another piece of her soul. Then came the final horror. She thought she had nothing left to lose, but the world proved her wrong. When the apostle took her, when she felt something unnatural growing inside her, she realized she wasn't even a person anymore. Just a shell, a body to be used, to be discarded when it no longer served a purpose. The thing inside her wasn't just a monster. It was proof that she had lost everything.